I'd like to invite Kent Cunningham. He's our CTO of Microsoft Civilian Group. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you. You probably don't need this, but there's a recording, so I'll give the microphone, gives me something to play with for the next few minutes. I'm going to try to be brief, but I want to make a few points about Azure governance specifically and some things that I think you might enjoy. The good news is about 4 slides into this, I'll do a demo and try to give you something that you can actually tangibly use. You said something that I really enjoyed. You talked about, Karen specifically talked about, for those in the video, you can't tell who I'm pointing at when I say you. Karen talked specifically about building a governance plan. And then she used the word implementing, or the phrase implementing guardrails to keep people within that government plan. And then being able to enable self-service. And I want to talk a little bit about how we do that specifically in Azure. And I love the phrase guardrails, right? How many of you have children? Just curious. How many of you used to be a child? How many of you took exactly the information that your parents gave you when they offered it to you and did exactly what they asked? Right? If any of your hands go up, come on, really? So I'm a recent empty nester, but I used to have the experience of my kids were big Xbox junkies, and I would always say, you know, you can play the Xbox for 30 minutes, but then I need you to clean your room. Or you can play the Xbox for 20 minutes, and then I need you to, you know, do your homework, right? And then what would happen an hour later? What are they doing? Everybody all together playing Xbox, right? And so I was the guy that, for fun, would go down in the basement, crawl under the house, unhook the cable so that Halo quit working, and just come back upstairs and wonder what happened. I would blame this on Comcast, of course, because I want them to love their father. But the reality was what I was doing is I was implementing a guardrail, right? The reason why I'm telling you this story is when we talk about governance, it's not about a policy. You can have a policy all day long. Have any of you in this room ever found your way around a policy? Right? You hear about shadow IT all the time. We hear things like don't use maybe Facebook from work, for example, or social media from work. Yet everyone does it. I had a customer 3 months ago say, well, we don't have a problem with cloud because we don't use it. Everybody believe that there's a customer in the federal government that is not having the cloud accessed by their organization at some point? What's the largest cloud service in production in terms of users on the internet today? This is a trick question. I've been telling this joke for 10 years, but it's a true question, a true statement. Largest cloud service in production on the internet today? Windows Update. Turns out patching 800 million computers in a single day takes a fair amount of bandwidth. And it's the largest cloud service in use today, second only to DNS, which is not a commercial service. Okay? I want to talk a little about governance specifically in Azure. Karina, if you want to set a timer, we'll see how I do. Currently it's 7:50. So my name is Kent Cunningham. I'm the Chief Technology Officer of the Federal Civilian Government business. I've been doing this for about 11 years. I see some really interesting things. If you like my accent, I'm from Nashville. Not a lot of people figure that out because I'm here about every other week. But come down and visit us if you would like to. I have about 2 slides that are maybe somewhat redundant, but I just want to reiterate some points. When I talk to customers, the number one thing that we hear about is not how hard it is to write an application to put it in the cloud. It's not hard to lift and shift a VM, right? It's not hard to create an Ubuntu image and have it ready to go in 5 minutes. That's not the difficult thing. What we hear from our customers is that what takes them the largest amount of time to move an application to the cloud is this governance plan that we're talking about. It's getting through the groups, the hurdles, some of us affectionately refer to it as red tape. It's getting through those steps that technical people, quite honestly, want to say, look, I wrote the application, I'm ready, I know how to push the button, turn the screws, make this work. If you want this to dance, I can make it dance, but I need to get through the screen or the filters that I have to go through to be able to make that happen. 55% of cloud customers say it takes 4 to 12 months. I've seen this presented as 6 to 9 months, whatever. It's a long time. It's a lot of process that we go through to be able to get that out there. So the need to govern, there's all types of different needs to govern. Every time I talk to customers about reasons to go to the cloud, or we're talking about moving someone to the cloud, you hear all in these days. I get the same questions. Well, is the data housed in the United States? Is the data encrypted? Is it encrypted in rest? Is it encrypted in flight? Are you compliant with whatever your latest phrase or buzzword is at the moment? Can you do multi-factor authentication? Where is the data replicated? How far apart are the data centers? It's the same questions every time. And customers ask these questions, and lots of times they'll still check a box on some spreadsheet that says, okay, this meets this requirement, but here's the problem. Then they do that again over and over and over for every application, every single time they want to move something else to the cloud. I call that, again, implementing a policy instead of putting the appropriate guardrails in place to enforce what it is you've decided you're going to accept as an agency that is going to the cloud. Our customers that are doing this right and are doing this quickly have figured out how to leverage those policies, put the guardrails in place, and enforce that. Our SIs that are running a really big business off of this are figured out exactly how to do the same thing and how to replicate this time and time again. Now, Azure has an awful lot of different features that relate to governance, right? I have about 12 minutes to talk to you, so I'm not going to talk about all of these. But there's an awful lot of features that Azure has, whether it's Azure Resource Policies, which I'm going to talk a fair amount about in the next few minutes, whether it's locks to be able to lock part of your subscription or controls or capabilities, resources that you may have in the organization, RBAC, the core network itself, the things that you can place within a resource group and who has controls within that resource group, who has access to the resource group, who is billed for the resource group, what types of applications can go into the resource group. There's tags and naming standards, which, believe it or not, are more popular for the billing people than they are for the technical people, because they want to be able to know when they get the bill, what does that particular component apply to, and who should I charge back for that individual component. There's lots of different things that come into play in Azure when we talk about governance. I'm going to make a small plug. Karina, you talked about Ignite earlier. Try to get permission to talk about something tonight that I'm not allowed to talk about quite yet. All I want to say is if you're interested in governance, pay attention to Ignite. There's going to be several good new announcements that I think you'll find interesting and carry out in some of the things that I discussed tonight and add on to that. So stay tuned to Ignite. So what I want to talk about today is a lot about Azure Resource Policies and why resource policies are implemented, what they can do for you, how they can actually enforce the guardrail, what Microsoft is doing with policies, and a few very interesting things we've done with policies in the last few months. So the traditional cloud governance approach looks something like this. It says, we're going to go in all cloud, and here's how we're going to do it. I'm going to get a cloud provider, and maybe two, maybe three, and we'll have them over here. And we'll have our developer teams and our operations teams. And in the middle of those two teams, we're going to have this governance team, if you will. And they're going to sit in the middle as this cloud custodian. And it's their job to get in the middle of the cloud services that are being delivered to them and the actual DevOps teams themselves. The issue with this model is that the capabilities that are being delivered by the cloud provider, the innovations that they're delivering month over month, the number of features that are being continually delivered are never actually seen by the development teams and the operations teams because of this standard filter or standard template that we've put in the middle for every single application. So what Microsoft would like to do from an Azure perspective is offer a slightly different perspective on this and a slightly different model that can be leveraged to take that governance policy or those guardrails, if you will, codify that model and allow Azure to be those guardrails to enforce all of those questions that I was asking earlier. Where does the data actually sit? Who actually has access to it? Where do those keys actually reside? Is the data actually encrypted? Do you have the Microsoft monitoring agent on all of those servers? Are you enforcing the latest code so that we're not 3 versions behind, because we know that newer is always safer, and we know that from our data that we watch as for how systems are attacked, right? You know when systems are attacked the most? The day that we end of life something, right? Because they know that we're not adding new capabilities and new functionalities to that anymore. That's why we know, one of the big ways that we know that newer is safer. So I want to talk for a minute about how to codify that. I'm going to give you a demonstration on how to do that, and hopefully this will be something useful you can take back with you. So Azure Policy has really three primary components, if you will, that are the primary benefits. The first is the capability to actually do enforcement and audit and look and see if the things that you want to put into place are the things that are actually being enforced and put into place. It can tell us who is making those changes, when did they make those changes. It can report, of course, to Azure Security Center and give you recommendations on things that you should be doing to your environment to meet certain requirements or regulations. We can be that compliance report for you in conjunction with Security Center as well. And we have the capability now to apply those at scale in multiple levels. This doesn't just have to be within a tenant level or just within a subscription level. We now have something new that I'll introduce in a moment that's called management groups, and we have the capabilities for these to, I think of this as kind of an organizational unit section, right? And we could say that a parent agency has these policies, and then an OpDev has these policies, and then organizations further down have these additional policies. And that's what management groups actually does for us. And then at the end, of course, we have the capability to do remediation. But I want to point this out as a differentiator for us tonight. If we look at Azure and the other major cloud platforms that are out there, the other cloud platforms are predominantly doing remediation. Azure has the capability for us to, and remediation is something where I say, okay, something actually happened, right? It's after the fact. I'm auditing this after the fact, and then I'm telling someone it happened. What we're going to be the capability to do with policies here is actually watch this in real time, make a decision while it's happening as to whether or not it should be allowed to occur, and then stopping that before the process completes. So I'll give you an example and a demonstration of how to do that. So let's go ahead and do that. I've already cut one finger wide open today, so my typing is already worse than normal. Wasn't very good to begin with, so I'm going to try to use both hands. So let's see if we can get to a browser. Oh, PowerPoint screen mode gets you every time. Hardest part of every presentation is making the projection system work. So if I open a browser and I go to my Azure dashboard, let's see if my internet connection is back up. I'm using the local connection here. I'm just using my own subscription. There's nothing fancy here. I literally built what I'm going to show you in about 30 minutes on an airplane. I'm a Southwest A-list preferred member, which means you fly too much, but you get free Wi-Fi, so you're supposed to be happy about that. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'll try to blow this up for you as we go through. To get to policies in Azure, it's actually very simple. You simply go to search and you type policy. All of life is not this intuitive, but this is quite simple. So if I look at the policy engine, the place where I really want to start here is in compliance. And I'll blow this up a little bit so you can take a look at it. It shows you some of the compliant. There's something called initiatives and policies. Initiatives are basically groupings of policies. So if you wanted to say, here's some initiative I need to be compliant with, I could then create all the different policies within an initiative that would make me compliant for that, and I apply that to a resource group or to a subscription or a management group if I want to go that route. So here you can see some things that I have for available. It says here's some things that are non-compliant. I can drill into those and find out why I'm non-compliant. I have things here that are audit. I have things that are simply require. So for those of you in the back who have eyes like mine, it says enable monitoring in Azure Security Center, audit unrestricted network access to storage, monitor missing endpoint protection. If I wanted to make sure endpoint protection was on all my Windows images, I could do that. Require blob encryption or audit VMs that don't use managed disks. Right? I have a variety of these that I can add, and it'll show me where I'm compliant and where I'm not. When I'm applying these, there's a broad number of definitions that are already created for you within Azure so that you don't have to write all of these yourself. If I click on definitions, you can see a huge list of these that you can choose from. There's a big bunch of these that I can leverage. I think my blowing up the window got ahead of the internet connection. If I go back to definitions, there's a big list of these that I can choose from. I have an option, again, to apply these to many different ways. If I wanted to, for example, I could say, show me, only allow people within a certain within a certain subscription to create only certain sizes of servers or certain classes of servers. We can literally do that based on SKUs. So I'll just search for SKU, and here's allow storage account SKUs, allow virtual machine SKUs. And I can literally choose if I only want you to use A series servers, B series servers, C series servers. This is the first thing that comes out of almost every conversation is how do I make sure that the minute I give someone an Azure subscription, I don't wind up with a $10,000 unexpected bill from someone sitting at a desk who is just trying to play, right? So we can set up policies for people within a particular part of your subscription so that they have the capabilities to learn and become familiar with it, so that you don't wind up with those big surprises. So for example, if I look at my current assignments that I have within Azure, and again, I don't think the people in the back can probably see that, so I'll try to blow this up. There's actually one here at the bottom that says allowed virtual machine SKUs. I've already done this. If I click on this one, what it actually says is pick a scope at the top. So where am I assigning this to? What is an actual description of that? Who assigned it? And what are those SKUs? So if I blow that up so that I can actually look at those SKUs at the bottom, it'll actually show me all the different VM SKUs that are available. And you can see here that I've simply selected the A series ones and the basic ones at the top. If you want to take a look at this from a coding perspective and what this actually is, you can view the definition. And it will show you what this actually is and what this is doing. So you can see that the policy here is simply saying if any of the virtual machines are not within this list of allowed SKUs, then at the bottom, deny. That's really all it is. And at the bottom, it allows me to do a pick list of what these things actually are. But for those of you who understand this type of language, it's not a very complicated thing to be able to write. You can write these for any component that you would like to out of all of the available resources that are available within Azure. Okay? So these different policies are available to us very, very broadly. So I have this already applied. I've got those SKUs already chosen. And so I'm going to go back to to compliance, and you can see where I have those actually applied. Now that I've got something like that that actually says I only want you to be able to create machines of a certain size, let's just try it. So if I go back to Azure and I'll go to Compute, let's create a 2016 data center server. We can name it Azure Meetup. Still July? I have another policy actually that I didn't bother to show, but I can set a policy for where do you want things to be created. Here is a list of the different locations where things could be created, right? This particular one says Central US, which I have actually not allowed in my policy right now. So we'll hit one that says go in a location that's not allowed, also use a server size that's not allowed. We could make this even further away because I only said a few in the US. We could say, Canada if we wanted to. I'll use an existing resource group, and I'll say go. When I tell this to go, it'll say what server size do you want or what server style do you want for that virtual machine. We'll go down and choose this D series because that's available, and I'll say select. It'll ask me what configurable options or additional options I want. Do I want public IPs? The way I normally find the public IP one is try to say OK, and then it tells me where the error is. There it is. What ports, do you want? then you say OK. And it's going to begin to process this, but as most of you know, Azure has a central resource monitoring tool that we leverage. This is going to try to go through that resource monitor, and it will actually fail at the top. And when it fails at the top, you can actually see that it says the reason that it fails is this is not allowed in this location, and the virtual machine SKU that you chose is also not allowed. So when we talk about governance and policy, the capability to actually be able to block things and stop those things and set up your templates in an organization so that this happens by default, and you know that every new application is going to meet these requirements, it gives you much more of a luxury, if you will, to allow others to go innovate on their own. One of the things that Karen talked about is once those policies and the guardrails were in place was self-service. And that's what we want to get to, so that those that are innovative can go be innovative and deliver those capabilities across the organization. So I'm going to go back to this for just a few minutes. I want to talk very quickly about some policy repositories that I think you may find interesting. We actually have two different policy repositories. You can go to GitHub and find them both. But basically, we have taken and created a large number of policy repositories that are not already in the system, so that you don't have to manually write these yourself in JSON if you don't want to do that. There are several major categories of these, whether it's security, things you're trying to lock down, management things. Do you want to install Network Watcher on all virtual networks? Everyone's heard of CEM, so everyone's answer here, yes, I want Network Watcher on all my virtual networks. Do we want to enforce policies within management groups? I was just writing these out to give you some examples of what these might be. Cost control examples. You can actually force it so that every time someone creates a new resource, that it automatically tags that with a particular tag, so that when it shows up on your bill, the tag will be right there to say, oh, the reason you have this amount of storage or this amount of SQL or this amount of compute or what have you was from this application, which you can map to this cost center and know which opdiv that should go to. So a very, very useful thing. There is also something that is now known as the Azure DevOps Secure Toolkit. The DevOps Secure Toolkit gives you a wide variety, 131 different policies. Something very interesting about the DevOps Secure Toolkit, MSIT created a lot of this. So basically we looked across Microsoft and we looked at our own IT department and we said, what policies do you need to create within your environment to create your own governance model? And let's take all of those and publish them out so that others can leverage them, since that's IP that we already own. Today there's 55, 131 of those tested and ready. They're all available and out there for you to be able to move with. We'll be actually doing more with those moving forward, so that more of those will evolve from audit to actual deny and enable style policies, so that you can do more for them or with them. I'm going to, from time purposes, just skip a slide or two. But I want to talk about that we also have capabilities now called management groups. Management groups gives you the option, if you will, to create those policies at a much higher level, and then create multiple subscriptions across an organization that would actually inherit those policies within management groups. So what's great about that is the hierarchy that it creates. So if I've created something higher within that management group and publish that across an entire agency, and then I have given an opdiv their own subscription, that opdiv cannot actually change anything within a management group above them. So everything that I want to enforce as blanket policies can be taken care of by the agency, and then if there's risk that wants to be pushed down to other opdivs and put them in control of those own resources, you can do that, and you have the policy and capabilities to be able to do that. That would look basically like this. So you would have a group at the top, and they would have their own controls and their own capabilities, and then you have the option to be able to push that down further in the organization with different policies. Now there is an order of precedence, as you might expect. That order of precedence is here, so that basically before and during resource creation, for the different things that we can do, The first thing we will do is we will append. So if we have said, if a server doesn't have the monitoring agent on it, right, append that, or if it does, the data doesn't have the tag on it, let's add it, right? Then if we have a deny action somewhere else, and we'll look and we'll say, oh, well, if we had the option to append it, and it's still not there for some reason, we can deny that action or deny that resource from being created. After resource creation, it's the order of audit, so we'll audit and look at it first, see what's going on. If deploy if not exist is applied, then we'll try to deploy. And then the last thing would be audit if not exist again, so we'll report that back to Security Center. So you have options across the board for really how this works. So in the end, your governance policy lifecycle really looks like this. You have to determine or ask yourself, first of all, what really drives your governance policy. Is it controlling costs? What are the things you want to try to do at an overall overarching agency perspective? Is it cost? Is it security? Is it management? Is it finance? What are the types of things that you're trying to get your arms around? We have to determine who those cloud architects are, who are the gatekeepers going to be, who are those people actually going to do the governance, and how many times do we want them to repeat the same wheel? What things can we agree upon that we could enforce at a higher level so that it's there every time, so that we can actually put our developers and our operations team closer to the services that we're investing in, so that we can again innovate much faster. What's involved in defining a new policy? We recommend, of course, that you start with audit, so that you can get a look at what's going on in the organization before you begin to simply deny things or allow things. So you can start with audit, get a good look at that, determine what those trends are, go talk to those that are non-compliant and try to ask why, what might be the needs of that particular application or that team, what are the concerns that they may have. And then, of course, handle those exceptions. All of those rules that I had earlier, if we had different resources, there were options for us to be able to offer exceptions if we wanted to be able to do that. Everybody has a special snowflake in their organization. Those that we may simply need to audit or allow things around for a particular period of time. But that's what I really had for you today in terms of Azure governance policy. I wanted to leave you with a demo that you could hopefully tangibly use, and I'm happy to take any questions. We're going to give away cold pizza right after this to the best question. Hey, it's a government event. I can't give away anything other than cold pizza. Yes, sir.
Thank you. The policies are at provisioning time, right? Can you also talk about policy informants at sort of post-deployment changes that may take place?
That's a fantastic question. So the question, as I always like to repeat the question because it just tells me if I've interpreted it appropriately. So most people, when they start with this type of governance tool and they want to deploy these policies, already have resources in Azure. What about that, right? I actually skipped those slides because Karina was giving me the, hey, we need to go. But we actually have a tool as well that will go back and after the policy, after the resources are applied, we can go back and look at those as well, audit those if you want, offer or deny if that's what you want. So we now have the capability to take the same policies, look at existing resources, and make the same types of controls enforced and implemented that I've talked about already here today.
Actually, two scenarios. One is apply those policies of existing resources.
Uh-huh.
What if somebody goes at one time, post-provisioning, and makes a change?
Makes a change to the application or to the policy?
Changes the encryption in the storage, let's say.
Right.
How would that get
So that would be a Security Center style thing, right? So someone makes that change after the fact. We've done that post-deployment. Someone begins to make those changes later. Security Center would tell us where that is based on the policies that we're auditing. So that's exactly where that would be. Yes?
Yeah. Yes, Kent, is this available in Azure Gov as well as Azure?
It is actually. So this is available in all of our regional centers as well as commercial. More cold pizza. All right, so thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. I hope this was useful. Karina, do you have
No,
more in wrap-up?
just thank everybody for coming.